It's just so wonderful to have these friends and colleagues here who are reiterating and repeating that central theme of connecting to others and connecting to nature, and how that is the center and the source of happiness. So I'm slightly changing the topic to go back really to the source of my understanding of this, which was Ladakh or Little Tibet, where I had a relatively happy life, quite a privileged life. But when I arrived in this remote part of Tibet, now it's 37 years ago, I think, I had almost all my ideas turned upside down. One of the central ideas that was turned upside down was I had been taught in Sweden that we should be proud of not needing anybody. That was part of what was sort of said with great pride. I don't need anybody else. I'm completely self-sufficient. I'm emotionally self-sufficient. I don't need anybody. In Ladakh, that thinking was turned upside down completely. I saw well, not in a short time, I shouldn't say. What I first saw was these radiant, smiling faces. I learned to speak the language relatively quickly and realized that there was a lot of humor and just this vital, bubbling, effervescent joy in a way that I hadn't discovered anywhere else in the world. And over the years, as I learned to speak the language fluently and lived with the people, I think I came to understand something about the basic principles of that. And broadly speaking, they were that deep connection, that interbeing, that interdependence with others, and absolutely equally important, that deep interbeing, interdependence with the rest of life. And so I saw how children grew up completely embedded in a life where the animals and the plants and the stars were part of their daily life and the knowledge that they developed and grew up with. I think sometimes Westerners look at young children carrying a baby and they think, oh, that's child, labor, that's very nasty. I look now at Western children carrying a dead plastic doll, and I think of that as robbing them of that connection to life that I saw there was so much part of what made them such incredible, connected human beings. The fact that children would carry babies, that a 13-year-old boy, I remember being so moved by this, a 13-year-old boy cooing over a baby, just the way I would do as an adult woman. I realized I'd never seen that in the West, because already by the age of 13, the idea of being a man meant that you weren't meant to be displaying those kinds of emotions. And this is all part of, as I see it now, and as I was made to see it in Ladakh, an economic system that has, over a very long time, separated us from one another, from nature, and also from ourselves. Every little boy longs just as much to be loved as every little girl. I mean, we all long for that connection. We need it. And yet, our culture and economy has separated us. And I want to stress before I go on about that economy, to just make it clear, as I describe in my book, and I hope that those of you who not familiar with it, you will look at it. For me, Ladakh is my Bible. I go back when I'm wondering what would be a healthy way of doing something. What does it mean? I go back to remembering what I learned there. And what I learned, among other things, is that the economy is not just a question of the banks and the money, but it's the money that has funded a particular way of knowing, particular way of being. So it's money that's funded the schooling that we've heard quite a lot about. It's money that's funded a particular type of energy and technology. Now that package of money, knowledge, energy and technology. That is the economic system that I hope we will all be interested in understanding better, and understanding that right now, if we see those contours of that system, we can make changes that will fairly rapidly make our lives more joyful and make us feel so much more empowered than we do when we listen to some of the dominant ideas out there. And one of the most prevalent ideas out there is that we, as isolated individuals in our nuclear families, and even more isolated, as isolated individual consumers, we are the ones who are driving this dreadful system. Our greed, our consumption is destroying the planet, is making people poor on the other side of the world. It's all our fault. That is a false analysis. We have played a role in that system, and we should certainly do everything we can to stop doing things that are destroying the planet and creating poverty. But the story that is the real story about this actually would make it very clear that there are ways of getting out of this mess that are far more direct, far more strategic, far more fun, far more empowering. And strategic means also more rapid, setting us in a different direction. And I hope, that the overall systemic directions we're talking about is the globalizing, speedy system that's taking us further and further apart, versus the localizing, which is structurally linked to slow, as Cable was pointing out. And those are the paths that we can choose between. But how do we do that then conscious? I think we need to be more conscious of those personal choices we can make. Let's get away from this idea that we don't need anybody. Let's recognize that every little child that's born, first of all, desperately needs love and care. If we can give that, of course, they can internalize enough of that love and having been seen and connected to be able to give back. But even as adults, we need constantly to be recognized and loved, massaged, cared for. And of course, as we get older, we need it even more again. So we do need others. Let's not be afraid to express that to one another. Let's not be afraid of expressing our vulnerabilities. Let's not be afraid of saying, I'm not feeling very happy today, or I'm feeling worried about, a lump in my breast, or my daughter's eating disorder. Let's not try to be perfect. The perfection is part of how the system is imposing these role models that make, particularly again, young children end up not only losing self-esteem, but actually breeding self-hatred, a self-hatred that then turns into addictions and, of course, serious problems with depression, eating disorders, and so on. So we need to do everything we can to move away from being influenced by those images and by those ideas. What I learned in Ladakh, too, was very personal, because my husband and I would be there for many years, about 6 months of the year. And then, as we went back to Europe, we would find that after 6 months in Ladakh, having had not a single argument, within minutes in New Delhi already, the tensions around us reflected into tensions between us. I mean, what this was an extreme lesson in how we are affected by our culture, by the community and the fabric around us. And so let's reach out and try to change that fabric, rather than thinking that we're going to remain isolated and try to do it on our own. We need one another. Another part of that way of life that became very obvious to me was that it was a participatory way of being. So, for instance, almost everybody learned how to sing and make music and dance. And everybody did that together. It'd be in the evening around the fire that even the little 1-year-old would be encouraged to start joining in. There wasn't any pressure to be perfect, to be the best singer, or to perform. And that singing together, I have found, is another quick path towards building community and building a sense of togetherness. And I'm very happy here in Byron that there are several groups like that do this regularly, and I urge all of you to go back to your communities and see if you can't start something like that if you're not already doing it. Another part of this, of a different sense of identity, was that children were using their little wiry bodies, running up the mountains, chasing goats, learning about the life of those animals as well as their own life. When we stick them into kindergarten to stay still all day long, we're prescribing, it's a prescription for Ritalin. It's a completely unnatural situation. So movement and exercise and really making sure that all of us through our daily life ensure that we move as much as possible. Of course, the slowing down is crucial not only to the relationship but also to quieting the mind, to shutting off the intellectual chattering. For part of the time of every day, what I saw in Ladakh is that what they did was to do that almost midway in conversation. You'd be talking about, how are you doing today? The weather is nice. Oh, Mani Padma Hum. Oh, yeah, it's a very beautiful day today. Back in a slightly different wavelength. But that breathing and coming in and out of that calmer mind was part of a daily practice that I think people like Eckhart Tolle have been very good at discussing with people. So my time is up, but I just want to finally reiterate again that this connection to nature and to community is something that we can start right now with greater consciousness. I urge people to get together with a group of like-minded people, and sometimes it might be difficult to find them, but just put up a little flag. It might be a film, it might be an email that is exciting and that deals with these issues. Try to find just a few people. You may have to go outside of your family may not yet be ready for this change, but try to connect in a way that will be doing something that you enjoy doing together, so that you give time in your busy, fast schedules for this regular getting together to develop a deeper interdependence, and together to spend some time exploring how you can better get this message out, what you could do to help spread this movement so that it multiplies. And it doesn't grow into a big hierarchical thing, but multiplies these community initiatives. Cross-cultural interchange is what we're doing here, and we believe that's an essential part of it. So if at all possible, also help your children to have that experience of the other, so that we can together support the revitalization of real diversity through international, global collaboration. Thank you very much.